So we'll give it a moment to sync. Let me know if you can hear me and see me in the chat. Thank you guys. I already see Ryan was mentioning the interview. So if you're not familiar, I did go on I do have some audio. There we go. All right, we're looking good. So yesterday I did have the pleasure of talking to David Pakman, going on a pretty tough interview. He didn't push back too hard, but he had some really good counter arguments for some of our statistical concerns. We talked about, the 24 election, the swing states. I also showed some new data for hand count versus machine count data. I did make some misstatements there that we'll be correcting as we go forward. I think I had mentioned the county was St. Louis County, Minnesota. It was far less than half of the county did actual hand counts. So I said maybe half of the county. So that was incorrect. And then I do think Harris won the county as a whole. So like 51% of the votes. So we'll go back and we'll, as I said, we are going to put out an official report on that data and more of those studies as we go forward. So we'll make corrections on some of those misstatements I said. But it was very interesting hearing some of the pushback. Definitely worth investigating why there's such a difference between those data sets as we go forward and asking these questions. So let me know. Can we see? Let's see. Yeah, David Pakman held off too long. I think, I'll be honest, before we jump into everything else for this live stream, I think healthy skepticism is important. I think a lot of these independent, larger media entities, they have a right to be skeptical, especially after the last 4 years when it comes to elections. I think this is probably the best way to do it, is to bring us on, let us kind of present, and then say, well, we'll look at it and we'll come back. That's the best option. I give David credit because there is reputational risk for talking about this for some of the mainstream guys. So hopefully this is the beginning of a few more people wanting to talk about these concerns. And at the end of the day, we just want to verify, right? We just want to do audits. I don't think that will hurt us. Investigations are important, So let's see. Everyone good? Okay, well, no worries. This will be recorded. It'll go up on our channel. So if you can catch this, if you can't, please check in. We're going to do a Q&A at the end, and I'm going to start talking about what we're going to go over. So the purpose of this live stream, I'm going to try and keep it short. This is, I think, the second live stream we've done, maybe the third, is I wanted to update you on where we are with our legal efforts. We've published that we are working on 2 different lawsuits at the moment, and I wanted to update you on those. One of them will be in Florida. And at the end, we're going to do the question and talk about a few other things. So first, timeline for our first lawsuit. Initially we were talking about end of August, then we said mid-September, and now we're almost at the end of the month, and everyone's asking, where is our lawsuit? Good questions. I will take the blame on this. All right. We should have known better than putting out expectations for something this important. As I said, I'll be honest, there's never been a successful lawsuit based on statistics alone. So we've had to go and find additional evidence, and that is the foundation of our lawsuit. So what are we waiting on for this first filing, right? Why are we filing it right now? So I'll briefly update you. What do we have? So we have plaintiffs across multiple counties in the first state that we're targeting, plaintiffs that voted, plaintiffs that could have been impacted. So there's our standing. We have an expert witness with a background, with a PhD in statistics, over, I think, 20 years of applying statistics in their field. And they are helping us do the expert report and reviewing all of the data that we're putting into this lawsuit. So there has been a little bit of a delay having that expert witness go back and use their knowledge to look at everything we have, because they're going to be in the court of law saying, yes, based on my knowledge and my reputation, this is credible or not. So that's very important. We found a few little data errors, to be honest, you have tens of thousands of precincts. Some of the data, when you double check it, there could be errors. So we want to go back and make sure there are absolutely no errors as far as we can find in our first filing for the data. We don't get a second shot. Some of the other things and I will briefly explain these, is we have extensive exhibits from documents from these counties we are targeting and have been investigating. And so we're probably roughly 90% of the way there for our first filing. The final pieces is just finishing the review with the expert witness and statistical reports, and putting the final draft of that complaint together. We've actually had to remove some of the evidence and some of the findings because to be honest, it's a lot. We have a lot, and we wanted to simplify this first lawsuit. It will be the first of hopefully many lawsuits that will expand out from this. So this isn't the end all be all. This first lawsuit isn't going to encompass everything. It's going to be what will hopefully open the door to widespread investigations of the systems used, of the results and recounts of the physical ballots. So that's the point of this lawsuit. It is not only to compel the states, the counties to do their jobs and investigate, but it's also to showcase some of the things we've started to find. Now, I'm going to briefly tell you a little bit about what we've been finding. I'm going to stop here for a second. I'm going to double check the chat. Anything popping up here? Okay, I'll go back through at the end and remind me when we get after Florida. I'll show you a little bit about Florida. We can open up Q&A, and there's an option, I think, for YouTube to let you start doing that. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about some of the things we're finding in our first lawsuit. As I said, I'm not going to tell you the state, not going to tell you the counties. We're going to be very vague until we file. We don't want to tip too much of our hand off. We're very concerned that we obviously want access to the original records, the original ballots. So we want to maintain those as long as we can. But here's some interesting things we've started to find. I think, as you're familiar, our statistics is highlighting a lot of concerns across the swing states. Statistics on its own isn't proof of election fraud. It is at best evidence, and it lets you know where to go looking. We've been looking. We've been on the ground. We've been working with locals in some of these counties and states that we are flagging concerns. We have been finding these concerns. Some of the things we're starting to find is we have found evidence suggesting manipulation of mail-in ballots across the entire state. These reports were provided by the counties. They show a decrease occurring after a certain time on election night compared to the official reports, a decrease in received ballots. We have yet to figure out a reason why this would be occurring normally. This is something that'll come out in our lawsuit. Specifically, we are finding a huge discrepancy for third-party ballots. This isn't something we've talked about in our data. We've mostly been focusing on the two primary candidates at the presidential or down-ballot races, but we're starting to find some concerns for third-party voters. And one of the numbers we're starting to find is, as I said in those initial reports, if our numbers are correct, and as I said, this will go into our lawsuit and this will be made public in the near future, but we're finding a discrepancy of over 200,000 returned ballots for third-party candidates that, from that initial report to that final report, are not there. So these are interesting things we're starting to find. I do find this interesting because third-party candidates not receiving votes has come up in some other legal cases, such as in Rockland County, with smart elections, smart legislation. So very interesting as we dive deeper. What's going on with these third-party votes? Why would third-party votes go missing? Why would third-party ballots go missing? What could this mean? So that'll come out in our first lawsuit as we go forward. That's some of the main things. There's a bunch more that I can't talk about or can't really get into, and it's a little more complex. But we're going to talk about Florida. Oh, I have lost the chat. Oh, no, that's the Q&A. All right, we got people working on it. My bad. Let's talk about Florida. So Florida is another place we are focusing. It's still in the works. We're not close to an initial filing. We're still working with retaining local lawyers there, but we've been putting that case together, all of the evidence, all of the findings, and the statistics. So I do have a snapshot for you for some of the Florida data. We're working on releasing both reports of our findings and statistical analysis as we go forward. We've not released anything like this before. This is still initial. We're still going to follow this up. We're still going to verify this. But here is a county in Florida. This is Miami-Dade. This is the most populated county in Florida, by the way. And we'll pull it up on the screen for you to start. So here it is. This is a heat map. I love heat maps, by the way. So if you're familiar with the heat maps, the way you read these, they're based off the work of Peter Klimek et al., which is, they published multiple papers. It's a group of people who've been investigating elections. And on the right is examples of different elections from Russia to Uganda. And a modeled free and fair election, per their work, is more of a circular distribution of votes. On the far right, you see modeled free and fair elections just being circles. Make sure everyone can see this. But here is Miami-Dade, Florida, for 2024. This is all of the votes in the county. And this is just Trump's share of the votes. And the way these graphs work is we're looking at turnout and we're comparing it to the percentage of votes per precinct. And this is the precincts in the county. What we're finding is there is a bit of a circular distribution of votes here, but we're getting a bit of a tail, which raises concerns. If we were to look at this and say, what could cause this effect? If this isn't caused by normal traditional voter behavior, could this be indication of a shifting of votes through malicious activity, anonymous voting, whether through stuffing or switching or whatnot? And that is what we're starting to flag here in the most populated county in Florida. We're starting to see issues that almost suggest there could be manipulation. And as I said, we've been investigating Florida for a while now. And this county specifically had some interesting things pop up. So Trump won Miami-Dade with, I think, roughly 55% of the vote. It was the first time a Republican won this county at the presidential level since 1988, I believe. So this is a big deal. As I said, most populated county in Florida. What's also interesting is the county has seen a shift in voter registration. For the 24 election, Republicans outnumbered registered Democrats in that county, the most populated county in Florida. And what's interesting is, as we've been investigating, I personally flew to Florida to meet with locals who have been investigating their local areas as we go forward. So I don't need this anymore, but I'm going to show you one more piece of this. And this is just another way of looking at that data. Remember, as we said, the heat maps show you a distribution. This is showing you turnout. It's just binned. And we're saying if there is vote manipulation occurring, in Miami-Dade, we're starting to see an effect that matches some of the effects we're seeing in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, where a threshold of turnout, precincts above that threshold of turnout, begin to get more and more votes cast for the Republican candidate for the president. And that's what we're seeing here. This is 10%. So I know this one's a little hard to believe, hard to see, and it's a little chopped off. But we do see, I'll need to verify what the actual threshold is, but I believe it's closer to 50 or 60% turnout and above is when we start to see that shift occur in Miami-Dade. So this is just another visual of showing this. A free and fair election shouldn't have this effect. From everything that's been documented in the work of Peter Klimek, Roman Udot, Sergei Sphilkin, a free and fair election shouldn't have any rapid shifts at higher or lower turnout. It should stay somewhat consistent from precincts of low turnout to precincts of high turnout. If there is any rapid change or shifts, this could be vote manipulation, whether stuffing or switching or algorithmic type things. We're very worried that this could be compromise of the systems. It could be algorithmic. We're not as worried about people physically going and stuffing as much as we are like a digital adding or changing of votes. So there's your data for that. I'll jump back up here. So I went to Florida. I've been working with locals. We haven't released our reports. We're working on releasing multiple pieces of these reports. But here are some of the findings that we have in Florida, and this will go into our lawsuit. Some of the things we found so far is we found evidence of votes being cast for ineligible voters without their consent. These are voters that didn't live in the counties at the time, that were moving in right after the election, closing on houses. We found evidence of potential fake voters added into the voter rolls and registering and having votes cast for them during the 24 election. We found evidence of potential removal of active voters in multiple counties in the state. So these are things that are going into our lawsuit in Florida. And we're asking the questions, how could this be happening? What can we do about it? And, what is the overall impact, at large? And that's where the statistics will come in, is we're like, well, if we estimate the impact of Florida, is Florida potentially being changed at a presidential or down ballot race levels? Did this have an impact at the election in Florida? We don't know yet. This is what the data we're going to put together will tell us or indicate, could that be the case or not? So stay tuned for that. That's Florida for you. So now we're going to jump into our question and answers. So I'll go through the chat here. So first question we had is, based on all of the data we've put out, have we ever got a response from Harris or Waltz based on our findings? As of right now, no. We have actually sent data for multiple states that we've not publicly made available. We've sent packets of data and our concerns to the governors and the secretaries of state of multiple states now, swing states and non-swing states. As of right now, no state has come to the table and authorize a investigation. We've had some states respond back, some states meet with us, some states actually look at our data, but they never go anywhere. So as of right now, no. Do I think they've probably seen our concerns? I would say probably. They've probably been made aware of the concerns. As I said, we don't know if they give credit to them or not. That is, that's not something we can really control. So let's see. Questions. How is Dr. Elizabeth Clarkson doing? Yes, we've been speaking with her on and off. She was recently hurt, so she's been recovering. She recently reached back out to us because she's interested in pursuing more of the work. She's been looking at her local area. She's been looking at our statistics. She's back in the fight. So you'll see more of her very soon. I promise. I promise. So she said something to us that was, we met with her again a little later after our initial meeting and interview with her. And she said something to us that we didn't really expect. She said, after meeting with you guys and talking about these concerns, you guys really motivated me to get back into things, because she kind of lost a little bit of hope. She's been doing this for years. She's finding problems, earlier back in the early 2015, 2016s. 2016, 2015. I don't know what I just said. Before 2024, she was finding concerns. And I think she lost a little bit of hope. She didn't get anywhere when she was doing her investigations and her lawsuits. So it was really nice to hear that she said we kind of motivated her to take up the torch again. And as I said, you're going to see more of her and her work here in the very near future. She is amazing. She has put a lot on the line to make sure our elections are free, fair, safe, and secure. And she doesn't do this out of political motivation at all. She does it because she wants to make sure your votes are being counted right, just like we do. So, all right. So a couple other questions. If the audits find a lot more total votes, okay, because of deletion, would that change all of the percentages of Dr. Mebben's analysis? I can't directly say. The way Dr. Mebben's model works is it looks at, I believe it looks at the precincts. It looks at all this data, right? Turnout, precincts, vote patterns, and it kind of references those. I'm not as intimately familiar. We've applied his methods. He has applied his methods. At the end of the day, it's still very advanced. Do I think it would shift things around? 100%, because his looks at distorted votes. If there's even more votes that we can't, detect, deleted votes that never made it in, deleted votes that got cast and deleted, it definitely would likely change some of these calculations. Right now, most of our calculations are based on either switching or stuffing, but that third component of deleting votes and they never showing up in the first place would add a lot to it as well. So not sure. I'd say yes, if we get access to the ballots, which is our goal, and we do these recounts and there are votes that are in addition, that is a big deal already, right? People not having their votes counted correctly in the first place is a big deal, especially because the machines that we're currently using to count our votes, tabulators, are being pioneered and held up as very accurate, right? Almost having such a very small error rate that is the reason why we want to use them, right? Is they're fast, they're efficient, they count things quick, they don't make a lot of mistakes. If we're starting to find a significant amount of the votes were miscounted, it doesn't matter if it was malicious or not. Those machines have problems, and people's votes were not being counted correctly. That is a big deal, especially because we care about our elections. Our elections are really the way that the American people have a say in what's going on in our government. So for whatever reason, malicious or not, if we're finding actual problems when we do these recounts, it is a big deal. Further investigations. Good question. So will the ETA be able to analyze 2026 results faster than 2024? Yes. We have built all of these systems. We have our dashboard. We have other projects in the work for doing these analysis faster. The only limitation is how quickly can we get the data and how accurate is the data. But yes, we'll be able to analyze the midterms as soon as we can get the data. We've begun actually analyzing other intermediary races all over the country from the 24 election. So we've looked at these newer elections too, and we're hoping to put those out. So yeah, I mean, we've built the infrastructure now. We'll be putting out a toolkit so that you guys in the near future can do this yourself on your own machine. That's the goal, at least. So yes, we're getting faster. We've already tested the methods. We're already pretty confident in the methods, being able to at least flag concerns. So it's just a matter of getting the data as we go forward. So Mario says he's from Italy. Yeah. I can't speak too much, Mario, on a lot of the political stuff, a lot of the subreddit stuff. We mostly focus on the data, but I do think as we go forward, there will be some questions about the politics of things. And, the common pushback we get was, candidate Harris was really unpopular. And as I said, as we go forward and we do our investigations, we do our lawsuits, we're going to find, is that the case or not? And then we can ask these deeper questions on what's actually happening here and figure things out a bit more. But I can't really speak to too much of that stuff yet. All right. So thank you all. Yes. So Jeremy asked us, how can the people help in addition to donating? Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good question we get a lot. So yes, if you want to donate, your donations will go to, your donations are already going to paying for these lawyers and these legal efforts, for keeping the lights on at the ETA, where we're running our servers and our systems to do these analysis, and the media team to publish things. We have some subscription services for managing like social media stuff. But how can you help if you're not able to donate or you want to do more? Excellent question. So as of right now, I'd like to say, think of it in a phase, like we're in multiple phases. When you talk about military stuff, you have multiple phases of the operation. We are in our initial phase, right? Which is we're building the collection of analysis. We're figuring out what was the impact, and then we're taking and finding additional evidence by going, in person, that goes in the lawsuits. That's the first phase. The second phase is these lawsuits. It is this direct action, and that is when we're going to start needing your guys' direct help more. Right now, really all we can do is, if you want to share our work and spread the word to your friends, your family, that helps a lot. Social media. If you want to volunteer, and you have skill sets that can help us, whether it's data, whether it's social media management, whether it's other things, we put out requests a lot. But outside of that, right now, there's not a lot more we can ask you to do just yet, but that will change as we go forward. We're working on a few different initiatives. Obviously, we've started to gain traction with some of the independent media like David Pakman. I think Destiny, he's a famous live streamer, and I've seen some of his work as well. He's a gamer. And I think he talks politics right now as well. So he's maybe interested in talking to us as well. So we're going to start talking about this more, getting it out there more. Really, the call to action is going to be this. Let's get our first lawsuits filed, right? Let's get this back into the court of public opinion. Let's get people talking about this. And when we go from there, we will be able to do a few things. We want to work with civil rights groups that can help bring people together. So get engaged in your civil rights. Voting is a very important civil rights. Get engaged, start talking to your friends and family. I would say get ready, right? As of right now, the next big push we'll probably have is a campaign around voter registration data, validating you can vote in the midterms, validating that if you were removed, reporting and documenting that. And then we'll have big campaigns as we go forward for pushing to get investigations, pending our lawsuits. But I would say it right now, spread the word. That's really what I need. That's what the ETA needs, is just spread the word, get people talking about this. Skepticism is fine. Skepticism is normal. Look at the data yourself, ask the hard questions, and we'll have more as we go forward. So just stay tuned. If you are not, the best way for us to update you is to subscribe to our newsletter. If you're not, go do that. Go to electiontruthealliance.org/newsletter, I believe, and you can put your email in, and we will send you email updates as we go forward. That's the best way to get those next calls to action. But right now, I just need you to hang in there. I know everyone is ready to go. It's going to take a little bit of time. We can't make big mistakes as we go forward. We have to be as great as we can be and double check everything, because it will be we can't make these mistakes. This is super important. So, but really good question there. All right, so let's see some other big ones here. Have I compared the states of concern, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Nevada, the 24 data to the 2020 voting data? Yes. So we've actually released, I'll have to double check what we have actually put out in a report form for you. We've spoken about this a few times. We do have plans to go back and release some earlier 2020 data for the same places we've been flagging concerns now. I will say this. Some of our earlier 2020 data does show similar concerns, but the difference seems to be a majority of the voting in 2020 was based around mail-in voting. I think Pennsylvania alone had closer to 70% of Biden's vote being mail-in. So it's things like that as we dive deeper, we're very focused on 2024, but there is that interesting shift in 2020. A substantial amount of voting was mail-in. In 2024, we see that there when we look at mail-in voting across multiple states, such as Pennsylvania, Nevada, and North Carolina, mail-in seems to be more statistically normal. There are some outliers, but it almost looks like it's more statistically normal when compared to like election day or early voting, which seems abnormal. What's interesting is we're finding that mail-in is counted by tabulation machines, but it's counted at the county level. And there seems to be a bit more of a stronger chain of custody because the county will track who it sends mail-in ballots to and who returns them. So there's a little bit more of I'd say a chain of custody for those ballots. So it may explain why it's a little tougher to mess with them. But good question. We will be looking at 2020 more as we go forward. We're very focused on 24 and we're very worried about the midterms. So that's kind of our higher priority right now was the 24 election compromised? If it was, we need to prevent the midterms from being compromised if that was the case. Good questions there. All right, let's see. What else we got? So Mario had some other good questions. As I said, I can't really speak on a lot of the political stuff. We just deal with the data. We just deal with the facts that we have. I don't really know. I will say this. We have reached out to candidates across multiple political parties. Generally speaking, when we reach out to like the Democratic candidates that could have been impacted in some of these elections, they don't want to publicly advocate for investigations. We don't know why yet, but we are very concerned that if this continues to go forward, it will continue to have impacts on third-party voters, on third-party candidates, and other groups as well. So very, very concerning. All right, so let's see. Some other good questions about some of the other states we're looking at here. We have been investigating North Carolina. Yes, we haven't had too much on the ground yet in North Carolina, but we've been, we put out a statistical report on North Carolina. We've been looking at how they did their audits. We've been looking at more. So we will follow up in North Carolina. We are looking at Michigan. We are looking at Wisconsin. We are looking at, these other swing states. So Michigan and Wisconsin are they're on track for also we've already been investigating them. Haven't put those reports out yet. Those are in the works. So hopefully in the near future, we'll have Michigan, we'll have Wisconsin available for you as well to look at. And someone asked, are we looking at the blue states? Yes. We've been looking at non-swing states that are blue and were won by candidate Harris at the time. And have we found problems in those places as well? Yes. We found the same statistical concerns, even in non-swing states. And what we've started to worry about is that some of these counties we're seeing problems in use the same voting systems, the same tabulators, that the vote counting computers that process and scan your paper ballots or your machine marked ballots. They use the same systems, and we're finding the same effects of statistical concerns that may be caused by vote manipulation. California has come on our radar for this. We put out a video. I think we'll put out I don't think we put out a formal report. We'll follow up. But we did put out a video highlighting California had a few counties in it that had the same statistical anomalies that we're worried could be vote manipulation. So yes, even some of the blue states, they use the same systems. Let's see, any other good questions? So are recounts done by hand or with tabulators, both cost? So when you're talking like for us, we would ask for hand count audits by hand. We wouldn't run them back through the machine. So in our lawsuits, that would be our ask. We're saying we can't trust the systems. We want to count them by hand. We want to count these areas first. The cost wouldn't be as much as you think it would be because we're not going to count the entire county or the entire state. We're going to do like targeted areas that are the most anomalous and then work out from there. So some of these places that did do audits, they did, hand count audits or they did machine count audits. And we do put out reports on why we are concerned some of these audits wouldn't have been sufficient to catch manipulation, whether it's sampling size or other concerns. But a very good question. We would want hand counts as we go forward to validate. So any other good questions here? As I said, I can't speak about like a lot of the political stuff. Someone had mentioned, Kamala Harris recently making statements. We don't touch any of that stuff. At the end of the day, I say this. I say we look at the data. Does the data say there are concerns? Are we seeing statistical reasons to ask more questions? And the answer is yes. Even if our analysis may not be evidence of manipulation, it tells us where to go look. And that's where, as I said, these lawsuits, we have gone and we have been looking. We've been to the places our analysis are saying there may be problems, and we're finding problems. So for people to say the elections are free, fair, safe, and secure, and they've not seen any evidence of vote manipulation, wait a little bit longer. Wait until this first lawsuit. Wait until these other reports come out, because we've gone looking and we've started finding it. And it really brings up the question of, if we're finding these problems from the outside looking in, why did the people whose jobs it is to investigate these things not catch this in the first place? We can't answer that question, but we can ask it. And I think it's very concerning as we go forward that this should have been caught, because if we can catch it, they should have been able to catch it. So I don't know. We don't know. We can't really speculate on some of these things. All right. Can we investigate Italy's election? We can apply the techniques to Italy. We have not yet. We do plan on branching out and looking at non-US elections as we go forward and applying the same techniques. We've started doing this to Canada. Canada had their election. We'd like to do this with other elections. The only limitation is getting the data and in a format that we can actually use. But I would love to apply our techniques to Italy if we can get our hands on that data. That is the goal, is the ETA. As of right now, the ETA is heavily focused on the US elections. Because we're a lot of our people are US based, but not all of them. And I think once we fight the fight in the United States, once we show our analysis can be used to investigate, then we fight the fight here in the United States. And then from there, the ETA isn't limited by boundaries. We can go to these other countries and we can do the same things and make sure those elections are free, fair, safe, and secure as we go forward as well. That is the ultimate goal, right? That is, we would become, a inter-country organization at that point, and we would be advocating for free and fair elections everywhere. That is a good goal. That is far down the line. Our means and our abilities right now are very limited. We're still very heavily volunteer based, and we're still up to our eyeballs in the work right now to fight this fight right here. But yes, we do care about other countries. Okay. So let's see. What does the timeline look like for this being in full force? When will the seat? Good questions. So I can't tell you. We don't obviously know what will happen, but the timeline, as I said, if we're looking at phases, we're in phase 1, where we're now getting to the point where people will talk about these concerns publicly, that they're not afraid of looking like an election denier, which is the common pushback we get. We say, hey, we want to validate our elections. We want to make sure that they are correct. Everyone does audits. You do audits in banking. You do audits in engineering for quality control. You do all of these precautions. So we do audits in cybersecurity to make sure our systems are working the way they should be and protecting us. And that's the same thing, is we want to audit our elections to make sure that people's votes are being counted and counted correctly. Because if they're not, as I said, the normal American, the average everyday American, the only way they have a say in what goes on in our government is their vote. And if you take that power away from them, that's the foundation of America, is having a voice, having a say, having a vote. And it is a big deal if that's not the case. So timeline wise, I don't have a timeline, but what I do have is the phases that we're pushing for, right now, right? We build momentum. We talk about these concerns. We put the data out there. We get people involved and engaged, asking these questions, wanting answers. And the second phase is the lawsuits into investigations. We don't need a lawsuit for an investigation, but no one has wanted to investigate. So we're going to have to start with lawsuits, highlight the problems we're finding, the evidence that we may be correct in a concern about a compromise of the election, then the investigations that come with it. And I'm hoping that once we put these first lawsuits forward, these other states will come to the table because we are finding problems, and they will do their own investigations. From there, it's not hard at all to do these investigations, look at recounts, look at hand counts, the votes, and be like, yeah, there was a problem, there wasn't a problem. And then we can collectively come together and figure out, what are we going to do about the problem? But the first step is making sure, was there a problem or was there not? We're still in that phase, the investigation portion. Is this a real concern? Did this really happen? Because at the end of the day, as we said, statistics alone isn't enough. You need more. And so that's what we're working on. I would say once we get to that phase 3, which is what can we do? How can we bring people together to secure our elections going forward, to deal with the current concerns of if there was a compromise, Did it impact races? And are those people in positions of authority now? These are things that is like phase 3. We're so far away from that right now in the planning phase, but maybe not in the long term, or it may be a matter of months. We don't know yet. But that's the goals. That's where we're going. And as I said, at any point in the process, if you guys are wanting to jump in, please volunteer on our website, help us fight the fight, make sure our elections are correct. So really good questions there. All right, we'll start wrapping up here soon. I didn't want to keep you guys too long. So we'll find some more big questions. So good questions about what can we do for the midterms. We'll put out more information as we get closer. But yes, please get involved in your local elections. Be a poll watcher, be a volunteer to help run your polls. Our goal as well is we're showing if these systems are compromised, we can't use them in the midterms. If that's the case and we pull that off in presenting this to the public and getting action on it, then we're going to need a lot of people to help hand count the midterms. So keep these things in mind if we can leverage and push that way as we go forward. So some other good questions. Let's see. Trying to find anything else I really want to cover. Where can we see the Canada? So I can't speak to when we're going to release our findings in Canada, but we have been looking at Canada and its recent election. I believe we will be putting out a report on that. I don't have a timeline yet. That is kind of at the back of the queue. But that is my goal. I'd like to put out Canada and compare Canada to the US and use that as, does it look normal? Does the US look normal? And go from there. And the main pushback we get is a lot of people are like, oh, maybe the US is unique and we don't vote normally. I think it's unreasonable to argue the US would magically vote any different than anyone else. And I would argue, based on what we've found so far, that normal, statistically speaking, isn't based on any unique factors. And the US should look statistically normal just as much as any other voting process anywhere else, because it is random in nature. And because the voting and people and the patterns are random, we don't get some of the effects that we've been highlighting are abnormal. We don't get any almost algorithmic effects to the voting patterns. It should be chaos. So Canada is going to be interesting as we go forward and publish it. Does it look statistically normal? And why? They hand count their votes in Canada, by the way. So it'll be very interesting to see what they look like as we go forward and we publish that data. So good questions there. Have I looked at some control groups, places that just do mail in? Yes, we have looked at Washington as a control group. It does look, and we'll put this out, I think, as we go forward. We've started using it as a good comparison. It does a lot of mail in. As I said, I can't speak on is it absolutely normal or not, but it has been a good representation because I believe they went heavily blue and they go heavily blue. So it was really interesting to see how Washington's voting behaviors look statistically versus other states. So I think we will be covering that. I mean, really the plan is to start covering everywhere that we can get this data out there as we go forward, because more data is always better. So, all right. So a few more questions and then we'll wrap up. And yeah, people are saying we were covered by David Pakman. Yes, awesome that they let us kind of come on and talk. Some good pushbacks. We're hoping to go on other bigger content creators as we go forward. As I said, a lot of my time is really spent on the legal stuff. So I'm hoping as we start wrapping up our first legal filing and getting it out there, that I'll have more time to start talking about these things and taking the time to go and present our concerns to a wider audience. But I think we're starting to get some coverage now. So, okay. Have I been in? Yes, we have looked at Iowa. We did put out an initial report on our Substack. Iowa is very red, very heavily red states. They're not technically considered a swing state, but it's very interesting. We have put out some concerns in Iowa. We do want to dig deeper. There are some red flags that Iowa exhibits patterns that we worry are not indicative of a free and fair election, but we've not talked about them too much. We are familiar with Ann Selzer's poll and everything. So yes, we looked at Iowa. Okay. One or two more questions and then I will kind of close this out. And I appreciate you guys popping in, asking your questions. Hopefully I covered most of the good questions about like legal stuff. So let's see. Sweepy asked question, do the co-founders still need donations? And how is the live election night coverage? Okay. So donation wise, as of right now, the ETA, obviously, we still need donations to fund our growing legal campaigns, but per person or so, we are working. Our system right now is the ETA executives and like the executive staff and team are going to have a portion of those donations be used to pay for our work and our services. So I wouldn't worry about direct donations or anything like that. The ETA as a whole is the focus now. So we made it past that hurdle. We may put out some type of statement on that. I can't speak too much about that yet. I don't have anything to present there. But donation-wise, all of our donations as of right now are heavily focused on expanding our legal efforts. As I said, we've got 2 main lawsuits in the works, one of them approaching completion, the other one, we've compiled everything, but we need like licensed lawyers. And so, yes, the donations that we've already collected, that you guys have already given us, we've been using those to fund these legal efforts so far. And we, at this point, we want to grow more. We're wanting to do almost multiple lawsuits in Florida. We're working with a local lawyer that is interested in working with us. We haven't yet retained them. So that's where some of these next big pushes of donations will go towards. And then, as I said, as we get into legal action and we get into the next steps, phase 2, we're going to have our reports ready for you, in the sense we'll be like, hey, here's what we've spent so far on all these legal efforts and projections and everything like that, budgeting. So we'll be more transparent for where the money's going and what the money's doing, and where we're at and what we need as we go forward. But as of right now, we're trying to keep our heads above water and just organizing everything as we push. So if you have management skills and you want to help the ETA organize and coordinate people and efforts and skills, please volunteer. There is no such thing as too many managers at this level for the ETA right now. So, but a really good question. And then I think the other half of the question was, do we have any thoughts on the live election night coverage showing Harris total votes dropping? Currently, no. We did it. We are aware. We have been looking into this. We don't currently have anything to release. We're worried. Obviously, some of the pushback for why some of those totals are different is maybe, the news misreporting or projecting things. So we want to make sure that that is actually the data is actual votes changing and not projections or not errors. So we have been looking at this. We haven't publicly pushed anything out because we want to be confident that it is an actual real concern and not just an error, it's just not problems. But yes, very good concern. We're very familiar. I think multiple states were having some of those problems on election night. So, but we'll have more on that in the future, I believe, but I don't know timeline wise. I did see some work being done on that recently. So good question. All right. I think we're wrapping up. Let me see one more. So Pale Fox brought up a good point about the systems. I did talk about the systems and the concerns around the systems in David Pakman's interview with me. We've put out a little bit about this, but we've not really focused on the systems as much as the machines. And here's the thing. We don't know concretely what's going on with these systems, right? We can speculate. The data tells us certain things. But at the end of the day, all the data tells us is that there are concerns of vote manipulation, statistically speaking. We suspect it is digital because of the way the manipulation is occurring, in the sense that it looks like almost a formula or an algorithm in some places, and we can reverse engineer that. When it comes to how you do this, I can't really speculate on the exact methods because I don't know. The ETA doesn't know. Really, the only way to truly know exactly what's going on is investigating and getting the counties and the states involved and actually looking at how their systems work. But I would raise concerns. Knowing, my background, cybersecurity and information systems, if I were to compromise an election system, I would do a few things. We need to defeat audits, meaning the machines could be tested before or after the election. So my compromise, my malware or whatever, should only change votes during the window I need it to. And on top of that, if these systems are connected to the internet, that is a really good avenue for me to introduce malware or even do real-time updates or changes or shift things around after a certain date or time. We are finding these concerns, and some of the precinct tabulation machines could have cellular modems in them, and they use these cellular modems on election night to send a send updated reports of vote counts to the counties. So that might be an avenue for compromising those systems through the cellular network. As I said, we don't know. And at the end of the day, the speculation doesn't truly matter until you can get an investigation. And that's where we're pushing, right? Is we want these lawsuits so that we can get these investigations, and then we can ask these questions. How did you pull it off? And the easiest way to figure out, did it happen, did it not, is to find further evidence it did happen and count the physical ballots. Then we can worry about how. But a really good question. I don't know. All I do know is there are multiple instances of the systems being targeted by bad actors. I know we had Mesa County, Colorado. I think we had another county in Georgia. So we know that these systems have been targeted and could have been compromised, or the images could have been taken, which all points to it's a possibility. We don't truly know. So, okay. What happens if a favorable decision comes in right around 22 marks for holding ballots? Good question. I think I will kind of wrap up on that because we'll jump back into the next steps and close it out. So let's say we get these legal actions, we get these investigations, and we get approval to do counts or look at these documents, but it's coming up on that 22-month retaining period, I think. So federal law says 22 months. You got to keep the ballots for 22 months. You got to keep other documents for 22 months. The judge of our case, right, whoever we're going to, whatever court we're going to, their judge can put out a decision to tell the county and tell the state to keep the documents longer. So we're not as worried. As long as we get the filing in before that 22-month period, which we're pushing for sooner rather than later, they can keep the documents. They can tell the counties to keep the documents and compel them to keep them so that we can potentially investigate them and recount them. So as long as we get there before those 22 months periods, they're available. And we still have a good amount of time before that window. But good question. So let's talk a little bit about next steps. Where are we going, right? So as I said, we talked about legal action. We'll have updates for you. We're pushing for this first lawsuit, trying to get it filed as soon as possible, 90% of the way there. We get one shot. So what's the point of this first lawsuit? And then what's the point of Florida? So as we said, we want investigations. Yes, we want recounts of the counties, excuse me. And that's just half the battle. This initial first lawsuit is also to showcase the other findings we have in addition to the statistics. So this first lawsuit will hopefully be a big deal because we have found things that all point to the same problem we've been highlighting, and we hope to showcase this in our first lawsuit. And then with that, we want investigations, we want recounts, we want answers. So now, as you said, what can you do to help between now and our next big push? Publicly, we need you guys keep advocating for these things, keep asking these questions, right? Talk to your friends, talk to your family. One of the best things you can do right now is you can go to some of these big independent news creators, right? And put in their comments or message them or email them and ask them to interview us. That seems to be why we got on David Pakman's show. Is the first thing he says was, hey, a lot of people have asked us about interviewing you. So keep that pressure up. That helps a lot. That the community wants people to talk to us. They'll give us the time of day. That's awesome. Besides that, as I said, now's really the time to start organizing. As we get into the phase 2, the lawsuits, now's the time to start, working with your friends and your family and local communities, getting engaged, getting involved. Civil rights groups are it's a constitutional thing. So voting civil rights groups, go check those out, go be friends and, get involved in your local community. That's really the only way as we go forward, bring people together, independent of how you voted, independent of what party you're in. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, everyone should care about our elections and our votes being counted correctly. And that's, just an American thing at this point. All right. So as I said, if you do want to support us directly, if you want to donate, go to electiontruthalliance.org. You can donate there. I recommend even just $5 a month. Monthly is great for us being able to budget and plan our next steps out. And then if you have certain skill sets, if you have data related skill sets, management, social media related things, editing, or just social media management, please go volunteer, electiontruthalliance.org. If we don't get back to you immediately and you think, you're ready to go, send us an email at board@electiontruthealliance.org. And we will follow up. We are still working through the countless volunteers who've already been, reaching out to us. So thank you guys so much. And as I said, we'll try and do more of these in the future, take more of your questions as we go forward. I'll have to run here in a minute. So I want to say a few final things. Do not give up hope. All right. Everyone's kind of at a phase now where they're very worried. Don't stop fighting. That is all we can do, right? All we can do is ask questions and push forward and work together. Do not give up hope. If you need some time for yourself, take the time with your family, step away from social media. But at the end of the day, in the wise words of Edmund Burke, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is good men to do nothing. So I want you to think of that. I want you to know this. I will not sit by and do nothing. The ETA will not sit by and do nothing. And I hope that you will join us in asking these questions and pushing for answers as we go forward. So thank you guys so much. Take care. Be safe.